The day Jake Callahan's prized Ford F-150 nearly disappeared from his driveway started like any other in the pristine neighborhood of Oakwood Estates. The morning sun glinted off the truck's polished burgundy hood, a vehicle that had been with Jake through 3 promotions, countless fishing trips, and the day he brought his newborn daughter home from the hospital. It wasn't just transportation, it was practically family. What Jake didn't know as he kissed his wife Meredith goodbye and headed to work was that Diane Wilcox, the iron-fisted president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, had circled his address in red on her clipboard during her morning compliance inspection. His offense: the truck was parked in his driveway rather than his garage, a violation of the HOA Covenant subsection 7.3 that Diane enforced with religious fervor. Jake had received the notices, of course. 3 of them, printed on increasingly brighter shades of paper, each with more threatening language than the last. He tossed them all, considering them nothing more than bureaucratic harassment. After all, he'd owned the house for 5 years before the neighborhood had even established an HOA. The grandfather clause should have protected him, at least that's what he believed until that fateful Thursday afternoon. Meredith Callahan was in the kitchen preparing dinner, barefoot as always. She had kicked off her work heels the moment she'd walked through the door. Through the window, she spotted 2 men in what appeared to be police uniforms approaching Jake's truck. Her first instinct was confusion. The uniforms looked off. Too casual, lacking certain badges, and the officers wore work boots instead of regulation footwear. When one of them pulled out a set of keys and began unlocking Jake's truck, alarm bells rang in Meredith's head. She'd been a paralegal for 12 years. She knew proper procedure, and this wasn't it. No warrant served, no knock on the door. Just 2 men attempting to take a $45,000 vehicle in broad daylight. "Excuse me," Meredith called out, stepping onto the front porch. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller of the 2 men turned, a practiced smile spreading across his face. "Ma'am, we're here on official business. This vehicle is in violation of community standards and is being impounded." Meredith's eyes narrowed. "May I see your badges, please? And the court order authorizing you to remove private property from private land?" A flicker of unease crossed the man's face. "Ma'am, this is HOA business. We have authorization from the board." "HOA business doesn't give you the right to impersonate police officers," Meredith said, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn, loud enough that Mrs. Peterson, next door, poked her head out from behind her curtains. "That's a felony in this state." The second man, already half in the truck, froze. "I think you should step away from my husband's vehicle before I call the actual police," Meredith continued, descending the porch steps, barefoot on the concrete walkway. "I'd hate for them to find you in those costumes. Impersonating an officer carries a minimum 5-year sentence." Behind her kitchen window, Mrs. Peterson already had her phone out, camera recording. Across the street, the Andersons had come out onto their porch to watch. What happened next would become neighborhood legend. A showdown between a barefoot woman with nothing but the law on her side and 2 men who suddenly realized they had badly misjudged the situation they'd walked into. And Diane Wilcox, watching from her SUV parked discreetly down the street, had no idea that her campaign against the Callahan's truck was about to backfire in spectacular fashion. The taller fake officer, whose name had read Officer Wilson, cleared his throat and took a step toward Meredith. She didn't budge, standing her ground on the walkway despite her bare feet against the rough concrete. "Look, ma'am, there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his authoritative tone wavering. "We're contractors working with law enforcement and the HOA on a joint initiative to maintain community standards." Meredith crossed her arms. "Contractors don't wear police uniforms, and they certainly don't attempt to hotwire vehicles without court documentation." Her eyes flicked to the second man, whose hands were now suspiciously hidden behind his back. "Remove those keys from the ignition and step away from my husband's truck." By now, the street had transformed into an impromptu neighborhood watch. 5 houses down, retired Judge Walter Hernandez emerged onto his porch, arms folded across his chest, watching with the practiced scrutiny of 30 years on the bench. The second fake officer whispered something to Wilson, who nodded and pulled out a document from his breast pocket. "This is our authorization signed by the HOA board. Section 11.2 of the covenant states that vehicles in violation can be removed at the owner's expense." Meredith didn't even glance at the paper. "I don't need to see that. I need to see a court order signed by a judge. HOA covenants are civil contracts, not criminal statutes. They don't grant you police powers, and they certainly don't give you authority to steal vehicles." As if on cue, Mrs. Peterson emerged from her house, smartphone still recording. "I've got the real police on the way," she called out. 3 minutes out. The second man hastily exited the truck. "Come on, man, this isn't worth it." Wilson hesitated, glancing down the street where Diane Wilcox's SUV was now pulling away from the curb. Meredith followed his gaze, recognizing the vehicle immediately. Her eyes narrowed as pieces clicked into place. "Ah," she said, a dangerous smile forming. "I see Diane sent you." Did she also provide those costumes? Because that adds conspiracy charges to the impersonation counts. The men exchanged glances, clearly realizing they were in far deeper than they'd been led to believe. In the distance, a police siren wailed. Wilson raised his hands in surrender. "Look, we were just hired to do a job." Mrs. Wilcox said this was all a proof that the HOA has special arrangements with local law enforcement for these situations. She lied, Meredith stated flatly, "and you didn't verify. That's a problem for both of you." The real police cruiser turned onto their street, blue lights flashing. The two men looked increasingly panicked. "Please," the second man said, his voice cracking. "I got kids. I can't go to jail over this." Meredith's expression softened slightly. She'd always had a strong sense of justice, but she wasn't vindictive. "Remove those uniforms. Now." The men looked confused. "Take off the uniform shirts and badges," she clarified. "Put them on the hood of the truck." Bewildered but desperate, they complied, stripping down to their undershirts as the police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Beneath his uniform shirt, the second man wore a t-shirt for Wilson and Sons Towing. Officer Rachel Martinez stepped out of her cruiser, hand resting cautiously on her holster as she assessed the strange scene. Two men in undershirts, uniform shirts on the hood of a truck, and a barefoot woman standing confidently in front of them. "Mrs. Callahan," Officer Martinez nodded, recognizing Meredith from community events. "What's going on here?" "These gentlemen were attempting to tow our truck under false pretenses," Meredith explained calmly. "They were wearing police-like uniforms to create the impression that they had legal authority." Martinez's expression hardened as she turned to the men. "I get both of you. Now." As the real officer took statements, Jake's truck sat unmoved in the driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun. From her vantage point inside her car parked a block away, Diane Wilcox watched her plan crumble through narrowed eyes. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She had invested too much in becoming HOA president and creating the perfect neighborhood. She wouldn't let one stubborn family ruin everything she built. Back at the house, Meredith's phone buzzed. It was Jake. "Hey, hon, everything okay at home?" Meredith looked at the scene unfolding in her front yard, the police taking statements, neighbors watching in fascination, two towing company employees being read their rights. "Oh, just the usual Thursday afternoon drama," she replied lightly. "But you might want to come home a little early. We need to talk about the HOA." The emergency HOA meeting that Friday evening was standing room only. The community center's wall-mounted fans struggled against the heat generated by 60 agitated homeowners packed into a space designed for 40. Jake and Meredith Callahan sat in the second row, their presence drawing sideways glances and whispered conversations. At precisely 7:00 p.m., Diane Wilcox strode to the podium, her perfectly coiffed silver bob unmoved by the fans, her linen pantsuit crisp despite the humidity. Behind her professional smile, her eyes were cold as she surveyed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. "Yesterday's unfortunate incident on Maple Drive has raised concerns about our enforcement procedures, which the board is addressing internally." Jake felt Meredith tense beside him. Unfortunate incident, as if attempted grand theft auto was a minor misunderstanding. However, Diane continued, "This incident highlights the ongoing challenges we face with covenant compliance. The rules exist to maintain our property values and community standards." From the back of the room, retired Judge Hernandez's voice boomed. "The rules don't exist to justify criminal activity, Diane." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Diane's smile tightened. "The board has conducted a preliminary investigation," she pressed on. "It appears the towing company exceeded their authority. They have been permanently removed from our approved vendor list." "Exceeded their authority?" Meredith stood, her voice cutting through the room. "They impersonated police officers. 2 men have been charged with felonies, and they've implicated you directly in providing the uniforms." Gasps erupted around the room. This was news to most residents. Diane's knuckles whitened around the podium. "Those are unsubstantiated allegations from individuals trying to escape consequences. The board denies any knowledge of illegal activities." "Then you won't mind if Officer Martinez reviews the HOA's financial records," Jake called out. "Specifically, the $1,200 cash withdrawal you made last week labeled special enforcement." The room fell silent. Diane's face paled, then flushed crimson. "You have no right to access private HOA records," she sputtered. From 3 rows back, Timothy Chen, the neighborhood's mild-mannered accountant, cleared his throat. "Actually, as treasurer, I'm troubled by several unexplained expenditures. I brought copies of our latest financial statement for everyone." He stood distributing papers to those nearest him, who passed them along. Diane slammed her hand on the podium. "This meeting is about covenant violations, not financial witch hunts." Speaking of violations, Meredith said, standing again, I've spent the day reviewing our HOA charter. Interesting reading. For instance, did you know that amendments to covenants require a 75% homeowner approval? Yet somehow, subsection 7.3 prohibiting driveway parking appeared last year without a community vote. More murmurs. Homeowners flipped frantically through their HOA handbooks. Diane's board members exchanged nervous glances. Vice President Gerald Thompson leaned into his microphone. Perhaps we should table this discussion until... No, Jake interrupted, standing beside Meredith now. We've been patient. We tolerated the increasingly intrusive rules, the arbitrary fines, the harassment. But yesterday crossed a line. He pulled a folder from Meredith's tote bag and approached the podium. This is a petition signed by 38 homeowners at 63% of Oakwood Estates, calling for an immediate board recall election. Diane's eyes widened. You can't do that. Article 4, Section 12 of our charter says they can. Judge Hernandez called out, tapping his copy of the HOA regulations. With signatures from more than 60% of homeowners, a recall election must be held within 14 days. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Board member Patricia Willis hurriedly whispered something in Diane's ear. Whatever she said caused the color to drain from Diane's face. This meeting is adjourned, Diane announced, gathering her papers with trembling hands. Not so fast, called a new voice from the doorway. Officer Martinez stood there, accompanied by a man in a suit. Mrs. Wilcox, this is Detective Ramirez. He'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Wilson and Sons Towing. As Diane was escorted outside, the remaining board members huddled together, their expressions oscillating between panic and calculation. The community center buzzed with excited conversations. Meredith felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Peterson, holding out her phone. You should see this. The Callahans awoke Monday morning to find their front yard transformed into a forest of orange flags. Hundreds of them, each bearing the ominous notice, PORT violation. Do not remove. They fluttered across the lawn like toxic butterflies, some planted mere inches apart. Jake stood on the porch, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. What the hell? Meredith joined him, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. It's Diane. But what are the violations? Jake asked, squinting at the nearest flag. This one says grass exceeds 2.75 inches and that one claims our mailbox is 0.3 inches below regulation height. Meredith scanned the street. The Callahans was the only yard decorated with flags, but they weren't the only ones under attack. Across the road, the Andersons stood bewildered before their garage door, which had been spray-painted with the words unapproved color, fine PNDing. 3 houses down, Mrs. Peterson's beloved rose garden had been roped off with yellow caution tape like a crime scene. She's targeting everyone who signed the petition, Meredith realized aloud. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The Oakwood Estates community app, normally used for block party announcements and lost pet alerts, now displayed an official HOA notice. Asterisk Emergency Covenant Amendment. Due to recent security concerns, all homeowner-initiated meetings are suspended pending board review. Additionally, violation remediation fees have been increased to $750 per day, effective immediately. Non-compliance will result in property liens. The board asterisk. Can she do that? Jake asked, reading over her shoulder. Not legally, Meredith replied, but she's betting most people won't know that. As if on cue, Timothy Chen hurried up their walkway, carefully stepping between flags. The accountant's normally placid face was flushed with anger. They'd frozen the HOA accounts, he said without preamble. Changed the passwords, locked me out of the system. Diane's claiming I mishandled funds. That's slander, Meredith said, ushering him inside. It gets worse. Timothy continued once they'd settled in the kitchen. I received this an hour ago. He slid his tablet across the table, displaying an email from the mortgage company that held his home loan. They're claiming the HOA filed a line against my property for persistent violations. They're threatening foreclosure proceedings. Jake's face darkened. This is intimidation, pure and simple. Effective intimidation, Timothy added grimly. 3 families have already withdrawn their signatures from the petition. People are scared of losing their homes. Meredith's parental instincts kicked into high gear. The lions are baseless. No Judge Wold. Her phone rang, cutting her off. Judge Hernandez's name flashed on the screen. The judge's normally composed voice sounded strained. Meredith, I've just received notice that I'm being investigated for ethics violations. Someone sent the state bar detailed allegations about inappropriate influence in local zoning decisions. Diane, Meredith said, not even phrasing it as a question. Almost certainly, the judge agreed, but proving it will be difficult. She has connections in the county recorder's office, the planning commission, Even the sheriff's department, I suspect. After the call ended, Meredith sat in stunned silence. The scope of Diane's counterattack was breathtaking. We need to fight back, Jake insisted, pacing the kitchen. We need to be smart about how we fight back, Meredith corrected. Diane has resources and she's willing to play dirty. Their strategy session was interrupted by a knock at the door. Officer Martinez stood on their porch, expression grave. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, but I thought you should know. The two men from Wilson and Sons Towing? All charges have been dropped. What? How? Jake demanded. District Attorney's decision came down from the top. Martinez's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Look, I shouldn't tell you this, but the DA golfed with Diane's husband every Sunday for 10 years. The system is, she trailed off. Rigged, Meredith finished. Martinez nodded reluctantly. I also heard they're planning a sweep of code enforcement violations on your street tomorrow. Specially assigned officers, not the usual team. After Martinez left, Jake slumped into a chair. So that's it. Diane wins because she has friends in high places? Meredith was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the forest of orange flags defacing their yard. Then her eyes narrowed with sudden purpose. No, she said firmly. That's not it. Diane thinks this is about power and connections, but it's really about information and leverage. She grabbed her laptop and began typing furiously. Timothy, I need you to get me every financial record you can remember from the HOA accounts. Jake, call everyone who signed. Dawn broke over Oakwood Estates with an unnatural quiet. No early morning joggers, no dog walkers, not even the usual chorus of birds. The neighborhood seemed to be holding its breath. At 7:03 a.m., the silence shattered as a convoy of vehicles swept through the entrance. 2 police cruisers, a black SUV with tinted windows, a county code enforcement truck, and a tow truck emblazoned with the logo of a company no one recognized. They rolled to a stop in front of the Callahan's house. From behind her kitchen curtain, Meredith watched as a tall man in an expensive suit emerged from the SUV. County Commissioner Howard Reynolds, Diane's longtime ally and rumored secret investor in numerous development projects. Behind him came Diane herself, tablet in hand, a triumphant smile playing at her lips. Right on schedule, Meredith murmured, pulling out her phone and sending a single text. Shove time. Outside, Commissioner Reynolds approached the house, flanked by 2 officers. Before they reached the door, it swung open. Meredith stood framed in the doorway, barefoot as always at home, dressed in a crisp blazer over jeans. Behind her stood Jake, Timothy Chen, and Judge Hernandez. Good morning, Commissioner, Meredith called out pleasantly. We've been expecting you. Reynolds faltered mid-step, clearly taken aback by the welcoming committee. Mrs. Callahan, he recovered smoothly. We're here on official county business. These officers have a warrant to inspect your property for multiple code violations. He held up a document. Additionally, your vehicle is scheduled for impoundment under City Ordinance 15.7. Diane stepped forward. Perhaps if you followed the rules from the beginning, things wouldn't have escalated to this point, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Interesting perspective, Meredith replied. Speaking of rules, I wonder if the County Ethics Board would be interested in these. She held up her phone, displaying a series of text messages. Communications between you and Commissioner Reynolds discussing how to target specific homeowners with selective enforcement. Or perhaps these bank statements showing payments from Oakwood Estates HOA to Reynolds Family Holdings. Reynolds' face drained of color. Where did you get those? You'd be amazed what's discoverable when you have 26 motivated homeowners with diverse professional skills, Meredith said, including 3 IT specialists who found the unauthorized surveillance cameras Diane installed throughout the neighborhood. Cameras paid for with AVOA funds, I might add. Diane stepped forward, her composure cracking. This is absurd. You're making desperate accusations. Actually, interrupted a new voice, they're making extremely well-documented accusations. All heads turned to see a woman in a sharp suit approaching from the street, accompanied by a man with a press badge. More vehicles were pulling up behind them. News vans. District Attorney Elena Vasquez, the woman introduced herself, extending a hand to Officer Martinez, who had emerged from one of the police cruisers. Thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. Diane's eyes widened in shock as she turned to Martinez. You? But how? Why would you? Because some of us still believe in equal application of the law, Martinez said simply. D. Vasquez surveyed the scene. Commissioner Reynolds, we've been investigating irregularities in code enforcement patterns across the county. I'd like to speak with you downtown. The way she said it made clear it wasn't a request. The commissioner glanced at the approaching news crews, then at Diane, his expression hardening. I acted on information provided by the HOA board, he said quickly. If there were any improprieties, they originated with Mrs. Wilcox. Diane's jaw dropped. Howard, after everything I've done for your campaigns, "And what exactly have you done, Mrs. Wilcox?" D. Vasquez asked, signaling to an assistant who was recording the conversation. As Diane sputtered, Meredith addressed the stunned police officers. "Gentlemen, I believe you'll find that warrant was issued under false pretenses. But while you're here, you might be interested in these." She handed them a thick folder. Evidence of HOA funds being misappropriated for personal use, including the illegal surveillance system throughout this neighborhood. From down the street came a growing rumble of voices. Residents were emerging from their homes, converging on the scene. Mrs. Peterson led the way, holding her phone aloft, live streaming. Behind her marched dozens of homeowners, many carrying handmade signs. "HOAs gone wild. Neighbors, not dictators. My house, my rules." Diane's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. I built this neighborhood. I protected your property values. Without me, this place would be chaos. Trucks in driveways, unapproved paint colors, basketball hoops.